Have you ever wondered why it seems like God isn't answering your prayers? The truth is, He speaks subtly, in silence, while we expect grand signs. Unexpected changes, closed doors, and that inner conviction are God's quiet ways of guiding our path. In this video, you'll discover how to identify these signs and understand how God has been speaking to you in ways you may never have noticed. Stay until the end, because what I'm about to share could transform your view of faith and life. God works in our lives in ways that often go unnoticed. The busyness of daily life, worries about the future, and even the distractions of our routine can cause us to overlook these signs. However, when we pay attention to the details, we can perceive small moments that reveal His presence. It could be a word someone says at an unexpected time, a coincidence that brings relief, or even a sense of peace when we face tough situations. These subtle manifestations are a comforting confirmation that God is quietly working. One of the most common signs God gives us is through our intuition. That feeling deep inside that guides us to make a decision or avoid something. Often, we ignore this inner voice, but it's a constant reminder that God is directing our steps. When you feel like you should talk to someone or change a habit, it's like a divine whisper. This sign can manifest in different ways, and it's important to pay attention to these moments because they indicate God's presence in our lives. Another sign we can't ignore is when we find a sense of peace in the midst of storms. Have you ever noticed how, sometimes, even in chaotic moments, something inside you remains calm? This is a clear sign that God is wrapping you in His protection. Many might call it inner strength, but it's really God's hand at work. This peace is what allows us to navigate challenging situations without being overwhelmed by fear or anxiety. Additionally, God often reveals Himself through the people around us. When someone shows up with a comforting word, a kind gesture, or offers unexpected help, it's God working through them. It's amazing how, in critical moments, He sends exactly what we need, whether it's advice, emotional support, or even an opportunity. These people are like angels in our lives, bringing divine presence in a tangible way. Finally, another sign of God working in our lives is the growing desire to seek more of His presence. When we feel an urge to pray more, read the scriptures, or connect with something greater, it's as if God is calling us into a closer relationship. This desire arises naturally, and the more we give into it, the more we recognize God's work in every aspect of our life. But what happens when doors close? That brings us to the next important point. When a door closes, the initial feeling can be frustration. We often cling to certain opportunities, relationships, or situations, and when things don't go as planned, it's easy to feel lost. However, it's in these moments that God is most evidently at work. The closing of doors often means divine protection, preventing us from going down paths that aren't meant for us. Think about those times when something that seemed perfect went wrong, only for a better opportunity to come along shortly after. God works in silence, and one of the clearest ways to see this is through the doors He closes. When something doesn't happen as expected, it can be hard to understand the purpose, but it's important to remember that God has a much broader vision than we do. A practical example would be that job you didn't get or that promotion you missed. Instead of feeling defeated, reflect on what came after, a more suitable opportunity, a path that seemed unthinkable but brought you peace and satisfaction. The doors that open are also clear signs of divine action. When you're on the right path, things flow naturally. It doesn't mean it will always be easy, but opportunities arise unexpectedly. If we stop to analyze, often the best things in life come from situations that initially seemed insurmountable. When something happens more smoothly than expected, you can be sure that there's a divine intervention, opening the way for what's truly meant for you. The most important thing is to understand that we don't always see the full picture. A door that closes now may be preparation for something much greater in the future. It's like an invisible construction that God is doing behind the scenes. Imagine standing in front of a door that won't open, and behind it, a much bigger and better scenario is being prepared for you. Knowing how to wait and trust this process is one of the greatest challenges of faith, but it's also where we can grow the most. And so, even though a closed door may bring doubts, God is always opening new opportunities. All we need to do is be patient, keep the faith, and stay alert to the signs of new paths emerging. And speaking of new paths, what happens when we feel an unshakable conviction to change direction? Let's dive into that. Inner conviction is one of the most powerful ways God directs us. Often, we feel an almost irresistible need to change direction, even when everything around us seems to push us the other way. It's as if something bigger than our own desires is pulling us. When this feeling arises, it's important to pay attention because it could be God showing us that something in our lives needs adjusting. It's not uncommon that, by following this conviction, we find answers we've been seeking for a long time. This conviction can appear in unexpected moments, like during a conversation with a friend, reading a book, or even observing an everyday situation. A practical example is when someone feels they need to change careers, even though, to others, everything seems to be going well. This person might be called to something more aligned with their divine purpose. God's conviction is clear and brings with it a sense of certainty, even when the path seems uncertain. Following this conviction takes courage, as it often involves leaving behind things that are comfortable or familiar. However, it's important to remember that change is essential for growth. When God calls us to change direction, He's leading us to something greater, even if we don't fully understand why at first. The initial discomfort gives way to a new perspective, and over time, we realize that the change was exactly what we needed to move forward. Moreover, this inner conviction helps us discern what we need to correct in our lives. If something isn't working, God gives us the clarity to adjust our course. Think about that feeling you have when you need to change a harmful habit, distance yourself from a toxic friendship, or even reorganize your priorities. These signs don't come out of nowhere. They are God's silent way of guiding us to the best path. And when we open ourselves to these changes, life begins to flow differently. It's as if each step we take is accompanied by divine confirmation. So, when that conviction knocks on your door, don't ignore it. It might be the push you need to reach new heights. And as we walk through this process of change, something curious happens. We begin to notice patterns of blessings and protection in our lives. But how do these patterns manifest? That's what we'll explore next. When we are in tune with God's plan, we begin to notice a pattern of blessings unfolding in unexpected ways. It may seem like certain situations are happening by chance, but over time, we realize there's a divine logic behind everything. These blessings don't always come in the form of material things, but they can manifest through opportunities, restored relationships, or even renewed health. God has subtle and surprising ways of blessing us, and the more attentive we are, the more we recognize these signs. A clear example of this is when, out of nowhere, we receive a job opportunity we never expected. It may seem like luck to some, but those who live with their eyes focused on God know that these coincidences are actually His hand guiding us. Protection is also a recurring pattern. How many times have you avoided an accident by seconds or were spared from a difficult situation? This is God working behind the scenes, even when we don't realize it. He's always working to protect us from dangers, whether they are visible or invisible. These patterns don't appear abruptly but as a sequence that unfolds over time. A small favor here, an avoided situation there, and suddenly, we see that everything was interconnected. The feeling of being protected and blessed becomes clearer when we look back and see how the pieces of life's puzzle fit together. God's protection isn't always loud. Often, it's silent, steering us away from choices that could harm us, even if we don't understand it at the time. Another interesting point is how, by moving us away from danger, God brings us closer to good things. Often, a blessing comes in the form of a new friendship or even an innovative idea that arrives at just the right moment. It could be that insight during a conversation or an intuition that leads us to make the right decision. All of this is part of God's divine pattern of protection and blessings. By being attentive, we realize that God never leaves us without support. Over time, these patterns become a natural part of our lives, a constant demonstration of God's care. As we feel more protected and blessed, a deep desire grows in our hearts to give back that kindness. And this desire manifests in a very special way, through a genuine impulse to serve others. But how exactly does this happen? When God is truly working in our lives, one of the most evident signs is the sincere desire to serve others. This impulse to help doesn't come from obligation but from a heart transformed by God's grace. It's as if, in realizing the vastness of the blessings we've received, we can't help but want to give back in some way. This feeling is a direct reflection of Christ's love, who came into the world to serve and give His life for others. And so, we follow His example, motivated by genuine, selfless love. This desire to serve can manifest in many ways. Sometimes, we feel the need to help someone financially. Other times, we're called to give our time, listening to someone going through difficulties or offering advice to someone who needs a kind word. The opportunities to serve are many, and they arise naturally when we are aligned with God's purposes. The act of serving, in fact, connects us even more with Him and makes us feel alive. A practical example is when you see someone going through a tough time and feel the impulse to do something for them, whether it's offering practical help or simply being a comforting presence. This desire to serve not only blesses others but also enriches our own soul. It's one of the most profound ways to experience true joy because we are fulfilling the divine purpose of being a light in the lives of others. And each small action, no matter how insignificant it may seem, has a powerful impact. Serving others also reminds us that we are not alone on this journey. We are part of a community, and when we reach out to help someone, we are, in a way, strengthening the whole body of Christ. God uses us to touch the lives of others, and often, we don't realize how important our gesture can be to someone. It's the sum of small actions that makes a big difference in the world. And when we see the impact we're making, we feel even more motivated to keep serving. As we give ourselves to service, we begin to notice something even deeper, a peace that surpasses all understanding. Even in the midst of life's difficulties, this peace remains as a reminder that we are on the right path, that God is with us. But how is it possible to find peace in the midst of chaos? Finding peace in the midst of difficulties is one of the most remarkable signs of God's presence in our lives. While the world around us may be in complete chaos, there's an inexplicable tranquility that takes over our hearts. This peace doesn't come from circumstances, but from knowing that we are under God's care. It's a feeling that transcends logic, for even when things seem to be falling apart, we feel an inner security that keeps us moving forward with confidence. This peace is a gift from God, and often it arises in the most critical moments. For example, someone may be going through a severe financial difficulty or a family problem, but instead of despairing, they feel a calmness that comes from something greater. This serenity is God's way of reminding us that He is in control, no matter what happens. It doesn't mean the difficulties will disappear immediately, but we can face them with a new perspective, knowing that we are not alone in this battle. What's most curious is that this peace goes beyond a simple absence of fear. It brings mental clarity, a sense that, despite the circumstances, everything is moving according to God's plan. It can be compared to the feeling of being in a boat during a storm, but with the confidence that the captain knows exactly where he's going. Even if the waves hit hard, there's the certainty that everything will calm down at the right time. And that certainty can only come from faith in God. A clear example of this can be found in people who, even when faced with difficult diagnoses or situations that seem impossible to resolve, manage to maintain their balance. They don't deny reality, but they face the challenges with silent confidence, knowing that God is working, even when they can't see the way ahead. This peace is what allows us to keep walking, even when all the signs seem contrary. Thus, peace in the midst of difficulties is one of the greatest proofs that God is silently working in our lives. He surrounds us with His love and gives us the strength to endure what would otherwise be unbearable. And as we experience this peace, we trust more in His presence, knowing that, in any situation, He is with us. Now that we've explored the signs that God is speaking to you, let's bring it all together with an engaging introduction that connects directly to your reality. Now that you know the silent signs God uses to communicate, it's time to put that knowledge into practice. Think about the situations you've been facing lately. Could it be that God is guiding you in ways you haven't yet noticed? Perhaps He's already closed some doors to open better ones or planted a conviction inside you to change direction. The big question is, are you willing to listen to these signs and act on them? Look around and start recognizing the patterns of blessings and protection that God has placed in your life. By doing this, you will not only find peace in the midst of difficulties, but also be moved by a deep desire to serve others and give back this divine care. And more importantly, how will you respond to all of this? I want to know what you think about it. Leave your comment below and tell me, which of these signs have you noticed in your life? And don't forget, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning how God is working, often in silence.